In the War of Five Kings, Robb Stark made some big mistakes.
I think you lost this war the day you married her.
But putting aside his mistakes, the dude was a solid military commander, and in the books, he was only 15 years when he did this. Pretty incredible. In this video, we're going to look at the battle in the Whispering Wood from a different angle in hopes of it being helpful to visual learners like myself. This is the battle where Robb captured Sir Jaime Lannister, but first, let's recap the events leading up to the battle. So Lady Catelyn took Tyrion hostage because Littlefinger had lied to her and told her that the dagger that the Catspaw had tried to use on Bran was Tyrion's. Jaime thought that was pretty uncool, so he killed some of Ned's men in King's Landing as a warning. Let his little brother go free or more wolves will die.
My brother, Lord Stark, I want him back.
Tywin Lannister wasn't too happy either.
If another house can seize one of our own and hold him captive with impunity, we are no longer a house to be feared.
So Tywin sent out Gregor to cause some ruckus in the Riverlands, since the Lord of the Riverlands is Catelyn Tully's father, Hoster Tully.
Fish, the sigil of House Tully.
Isn't that your wife's house? Tully, my Lord Hand.
Gregor rode around in unmarked armor, killing innocent people, innocent cows, burning innocent fields. He was being really mean.
Can you think of any reason the Lannisters might possibly have for being angry with your wife?
Meanwhile, in King's Landing, King Robert was out hunting, so it was on Ned to help out the people who came asking for justice. So Ned sentenced Gregor to death.
A bold move, my lord.
Ned sent out Beric Dondarrion and 100 good men to carry out this sentence. So King Robert died, then Cersei and Littlefinger worked together to place Joffrey on the throne, backstab Ned and throw him in the dungeons. Up in Winterfell, Robb Stark called his banners and headed south to Moat Cailin, which is in the Neck. Tywin and Jaime called the banners of the Rock and split forces, about 15,000 and 20,000 in the books, and 30,000 each in the show.
I'm giving you half of our forces, 30,000 men. We'll bring the Catelyn Stark's girlhood home and remind her that Lannisters pay their debts.
The Riverlords are falling back, with Jaime Lannister at their heels, and Lord Tywin is bringing round a second Lannister army from the south. Our scouts confirm it's even larger than the Kingslayers.
And last but not least, after Bronn won Tyrion's trial by combat at the Eyrie, Tyrion and Cat both left the Vale separately. Tyrion eventually met up with Tywin, and Cat and her uncle, the legendary Blackfish, eventually met up with her son, Robb Stark, and Moat Cailin.
I would speak with my son alone.
And before we get into it, it's very important to note that in the books and the show alike, Cat stressed to Robb that winning this means life or death for his entire family.
Do you know what happened to the Targaryen children when the Mad King fell?
They were butchered in their sleep.
On the orders of Tywin Lannister. If you lose, your father dies. Your sisters die. We die.
Alright, so Cat and Robb discuss strategy in private. Great John Umber wants to attack Tywin, even though Tywin had greater numbers in both the show and the books. The Glovers and the Karstarks preferred to go around Tywin and meet up with Edmure at Riverrun. Robb saw pros and cons to both these strategies. But instead, he comes up with a third option. Send some of his troops down on the east side of the river to fight Tywin, and simultaneously secretly cross the Green Fork at the Twins, then travel south on the west side of the river and meet up with Edmure at Riverrun in order to align the northern forces with the Riverlands. In the show, he sends only 2,000 of his 18,000 men to fight Tywin, so he was using them as a distraction and sadly as a sacrifice. I kind of hate that, to be honest. In the books, to fight Tywin, he sends Roose Bolton with the majority of his foot, meaning 16 of his 22,000 men after picking up 4,000 men from House Frey. And Robb heads towards Riverrun and Jaime with just 6,000 men, mainly cavalry. And the plan worked. Tywin got word of the Northerners and prepared for battle on the east side of the river instead of heading over to help Jaime.
Sir Adam bids me report that the Northmen have crossed the Neck.
The wolf rushes into the lion's jaws, so be it.
While Robb would end up sneaking down on the west side of the river to ambush Jaime, but we're not there just yet. It's worth noting that in order to do all this, Robb had to make the marriage pact with Lord Frey in order to get access to the bridge in order to cross the river at the Twins. And Robb's men had to constantly shoot down crows to avoid any messages being sent out to Tywin, and they also had to kill outriders, scouts, credit to the Blackfish. On the other hand, in the show, they actually used one of the outriders to mislead Tywin by relaying a false story.
Tell Lord Tywin, winter is coming for him. 20,000 Northerners marching south to find out if he really does shit go.
Our scouts tell us the Stark host has moved south from the Twins. with Lord Frey's levies in tow.
Now, unfortunately, while they are making these plans near the twins, they get word that Sir Jaime already captured Edmure, Catelyn's brother and heir to Riverrun. So now Jaime's laying siege to Riverrun. Alright, here we go. The battle in the Whispering Wood, which happens in A Game of Thrones, Catelyn 10. Robb's traveling south with about 6,000 men, but Jaime's got around 15,000 men laying siege to Riverrun. In the show, he heads down with around 22,000 and Jaime has about 30,000. The Blackfish notes that Jaime is not the type of man to sit back while his carpenters build siege towers, so they send out a small party to raid him, flying Tully banners, and lure him away from Riverrun. This type of raiding party had been going on for a while by the men of the Riverlands, so Jaime did not expect to ride north into an ambush by the entire northern army. Because keep in mind, Jaime had 15,000 men in total at Riverrun, but he went after this little group of supposed raiders with probably around 2,000 men, which is 3/4 of his horse. So in the books, he was not only surprised, but way outnumbered. Robb and the Mallisters are on the west side of the stream. Mage Mormont, the mom of the little bear Lyanna Mormont, while Mage is on the east side of the stream. Mage blows a warhorn as the last of Jaime's forces makes its way up into the trap. Robb's direwolf Greywind lets out a howl, as if connected to Robb's soul. Hoo! Here's what Catelyn thinks, quote, "The sound seemed to go right through Catelyn Stark, and she found herself shivering. It was a terrible sound, a frightening sound, yet there was music in it too. For a second, she felt something like pity for the Lannisters below. So this is what death sounds like," she thought. Hoo! Came the answer from the far ridge as the Great John winded his own horn. To east and west, the trumpets of the Mallisters and Freys blew vengeance. North, where the valley narrowed and bent like a cocked elbow, Lord Karstark's warhorns added their own deep, mournful voices to the dark chorus. Men were shouting and horses rearing in the stream below. Bowmen in the woods let loose arrows, and Robb's cavalry charges down from all sides. Quote, "Afterward, she could not claim she had seen the battle. Yet she could hear, and the valley rang with echoes, the crack of a broken lance, the clash of swords, the cries of Lannister and Winterfell and Tully, Riverrun and Tully." When she realized there was no more to see, she closed her eyes and listened. The battle came alive around her. She heard hoofbeats, iron boots splashing in shallow water, the woody sound of swords on oaken shields and the scrape of steel against steel, the hiss of arrows, the thunder of drums, the terrified screaming of thousands of horses. Men shouted curses and begged for mercy, and got it. Or not, and lived. Or died. The ridges seemed to play queer tricks with sound. Once she heard Robb's voice, as clear as if he'd been standing at her side, calling, "To me! To me!" And she heard his direwolf snarling and growling, heard the snap of those long teeth, the tearing of flesh, shrieks of fear and pain from man and horse alike. Was there only one wolf? It was hard to be certain. Little by little, the sounds dwindled and died, until at last there was only one wolf. As a red dawn broke in the east, Greywind began to howl again. Wow, killer passage. Well done, George. Thank you for that. But before we go, let's check out what Jaime did. It's pretty badass, and he ends up killing some Karstarks, which is why Lord Karstark got mad and then killed some of Jaime's cousins later on in the story. Quote, "No one can fault Lannister on his courage," Glover said. When he saw that he was lost, he rallied his retainers and fought his way up the valley, hoping to reach Lord Robb and cut him down. And he almost did. He mislaid his sword and Eddard Karstark's neck, after he took Torrhen's hand off and split Darren Horwood's skull open, Robb said. All the time he was shouting for me. If they hadn't tried to stop him, ... So that's part 1. Check out the links in the video description if you want to know what happened in the books with Roose versus Tywin on the east side of the river, and also the part 2 over at Riverrun, because even though they captured Jaime, he still had about 12 or 13,000 troops laying siege to Riverrun, but not for long.
We must return to Casterly Rock to raise
They
more.
have my son!